Hey gang, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the money monsters for Enneagram Type 7 in detail. I call them the grabber and the gorger. When the Type 7 is either money avoidant, I call them the gorger, or when they're money anxious, the grabber. Now, Type 7s, now as we've talked about in other videos, they have their psychological umbilical cord that was cut in childhood through fear. They had a lot of fear in their external environment in childhood that somehow that environment wasn't going to meet their needs, their emotional, physical, or psychological needs. So sevens, they externalize that fear and they kind of go out into the world looking to satiate it. They figure if my environment isn't going to provide the resources that I want and need, I'm going to make them happen for myself. And so that gets them into this. They have what we call their worst vice, which is gluttony, which isn't necessarily a gluttony for food per se, but more like experiences and appetites. It can be food, but for pleasures, for anything that's going to kind of help satiate this sort of sense of lack of fulfillment that they have this. You might say that the motto or theme song for a Type 7 is the YouTube song, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Like sevens are always looking for more from life. And so that's why we call them the enthusiast, or I call them the SUV of egos, because they're ready for any off-road adventure as long as it doesn't really involve facing their pain in the present moment. Now, in this quest for fulfillment, if a 7 is money avoidant, then they become the gorger, meaning they kind of get stuck on the hedonic treadmill. They're always, as soon as money comes in, they tend to gorge on it and spend it on experiences, on stuff, whether it could be vacations or restaurants or the next shiny new toy. They tend to, or unfortunately could also be on, alcohol or substances or things that are kind of giving them pleasure in the present moment, but might be really destroying their long-term financial or financial health or even physical health. So here are a couple of the traits of the gorger. Now you won't necessarily resonate with all of these as a 7, but maybe because we often mix and match some of these traits, and we can often be anxious in one area of our financial life and avoidant in another. So as always, there's the 4 pillars of finance, and that's earning, saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, and giving are the 4 areas of your financial life you need to focus on. And you might be anxious in one area but avoidant in another. But if you are an avoidant 7, and you're the gorger, one of the biggest traits you'll find is delayed gratification deficiency. So a lot of 7s have a hard time waiting for the future to come. So they're not even going to wait for the paycheck to come. They'll just put something on a credit card, or the paycheck comes in, and next thing you know, it's all going out to whatever it is that's going to satisfy their immediate desires. So they need to really try to maybe work on a future fund, right? So how can you think of your savings as a way of reframe them perhaps as a way for planning bigger and better things like, I don't know, a secure retirement or financial freedom, independence? Because I know 7s, you love your freedom. So think about how much of freedom you're giving up in the future in exchange for that shiny new trinket or that meal out tonight. Then we have the escape artist ailment. Now that's for the 7s, the gorgers, who are almost using like their wallet as a teleportation device into the future. It's that anticipation. For 7s, it isn't so much the experience itself, it's the anticipation of the experience that they get excited about. It's the planning for it. It's the looking forward to the future that keeps them out of the present moment where their pain might be. So when a negative emotion comes in, they might want to zap that away by like going online and purchase with another Amazon purchase, or making that reservation, or booking that vacation. So now they're living in their future, and so that fantasy world inside their head about what might be or will be or could be, rather than having to sit with the uncomfortableness right here and now. And that leads to another trait for the grabbers and most 7s in general, which I call FOMO fever, or the fear of missing out fever, right? That's the, oh boy, what's next? Gotta, they tend to want to keep all their options open and have a hard time committing to one thing. Although they like to plan things, they don't like to commit to things too easily. So what they really need to work on is what's often called JOMO, or the joy of missing out. How can you find joy just being comfortable in yourself in the present moment with the things and the wonderful blessings you have around you, rather than always thinking that your satisfaction is going to come somewhere in the future, because the future never ever arrives, right? You're always only living in the present, and then you're never really satiated as a result. And then there's a kind of another trait for the Gorger is planning phobia. That doesn't mean they don't like planning their adventures, but they don't like committing to any one long-term action. So like if you ask them what their 5-year financial plan is, they can break out in hives. Or they might have so many different ideas and business ideas in their head, or things they want to start, or projects they want to do. They tend to have a hard time committing to one of them and saying, this is the course of action that's right for me, and sticking with it. Often with 7s, we see another trait called, I just call it just full up responsibility rejection. Sometimes the phrase in Latin is called puer aeternus, or the eternal child or boy. It's a sexist language, could be girl. But it's that idea of like they treat their bills and bank statements with like, they need a hazmat suit to open those things. They're sort of like they're radioactive and toxic. They are kind of rejecting basic adulting, essentially, like all the basic responsibilities that go with earning, saving, making a living, kind of chafe at their constraints that essentially can be limiting, and the 7 can find that difficult to take on those responsibilities sometimes. And they need to really learn that no one's going to care about your financial life as much as you. So you have to take this sort of radical responsibility for your financial life, and not think that mommy or daddy or your lover, your partner, somebody else is going to do this. I'll just outsource all this to my partner. It's like all the budgeting and all the bookkeeping. It's like, yeah, you're setting yourself up for all kinds of financial problems as a result of that. And then we also have commitment issues that 7s can have. There's so many plans that they have a hard time committing to any one of them. They're always think the grass is always greener on the other side of the street, or someone else's life is better, someone's got more. And they will also have the experience junkies. That's kind of related to the FOMO. But who needs a good savings account when you've got memories, right? So 7s treat memories and experiences like Pokemon cards. They want to collect them all. And then lastly, for the Gorger, they can have boundary bugs, which means that their financial boundaries can be as solid as a wet paper bag. So they might be out hanging out with friends at a bar and suddenly buying drinks for everybody, and they're racking up a credit card debt without thinking twice about it. And suddenly the next day, both the physical and the financial hangover can be quite devastating. All right, so that's a little bit about the Gorger, but essentially they're like the prodigal son. If you remember that story from the Old Testament, the son who takes his inheritance and squanders it on high living, and then comes back begging for slop from the pig pen from his father just because he's starving and can't get anything to eat. So you don't want to be like that. Then we've got the grabber, which is the money anxious 7. So some 7s are so afraid of being in pain or privation that they really want all the money, and they get stuck on that treadmill of like they can't seem to stop making enough or gaining enough or making more, because they want to have so much money that they don't ever have to worry about it running out or being in lack. And that can actually serve you well in some ways financially. It's not always negative, but it can get you stuck on a hamster wheel of never knowing when's enough and when to stop, or working yourself to death to exhaustion. You've pushed yourself too far. So they often tend to be suckers for get rich quick schemes, and they're also trying to chase the big win or the big high rather than maybe taking more prudent approach to their finances and to their business endeavors. So here are some traits of the grabber. There is the I'll be happy when syndrome. It's the idea I'll be happy when I get this promotion. It's be happy when I make this much money. It's be happy when I get all the things and the toys and the experiences and the vacations. It's like I'll be happy on vacation, but then they're on vacation and they're thinking about something else. Right? Their mind isn't even there when they get there. And then some 7s, they have what I call the Gorger has financial constraint aversion, right? So they think like budgets are fun-sucking vampires, and they'll often work hard to have enough money that they don't have to worry about budgeting too much. But that can also be like it's like pouring money into a leaky bucket, right? They want to have a lot, so they don't have to worry about it, but they're not really being mindful of what's going out, and so then they just keep going and going and going and going. Then we have the persistent scarcity mindset. I've seen a lot of 7s in my financial practice. They might have enough money, they might have more dough than a bakery, but they're always acting like they're one paycheck away from living in a cardboard box. So they're kind of part Scrooge McDuck and part shopaholic, which is kind of a bizarre combination. Any rate, so getting them out of that sense that the world's never going to provide them enough keeps them spinning like hamsters on a wheel and kind of driving themselves a little bit crazy. A lot of sevens, I noticed this, they have a very high risk tolerance when it comes to their investments or their business projects. That they like the risky things a little bit. They don't have as much fear, perhaps, because they're sort of out of touch with their fear sometimes. And that can lead them to wanting to chase the next hot stock tip from an Uber driver, or their friend is making a bunch of money in crypto, and they want to get on the next big thing they don't want to miss out on. But that often creates a great deal of instability in their financial life, because those things rarely pan out or play out. Probably the best investment tip I can give you is index funds. Frankly, they're your tried and true path to real wealth. Then a lot of sevens, I find this financial over-optimism. They may have big plans and big ideas of the businesses they're going to start or the career moves they're going to make, but they tend to overestimate the positive outcome and tend to mitigate a lot of the risks or some of the potential downsides, and can often fall flat in their face as a result. And then there's also a trait of the Gorger would be financial identity crisis, where they're equating their net worth somehow with their level of contentment and satisfaction in life. And so if the stock market goes up, they're on a high, and the stock market crashes, they're down in the dumps. And so they really need to make sure that they're disconnecting their groundedness, stability, and mindfulness in the present moment, independent of external things in general, but also what's going on with the stock market or their portfolio or things like that. And then a lot of sevens, sevens have very quick minds, and they can make great researchers, but they can get into analysis paralysis ailment is what I call it. So despite their typically impulsive nature, they can get stuck in research mode, faster than a computer running on Windows 95. They just gotta there are so many options in front of them. They don't know how to limit the scope of what they're looking at. They get sort of overwhelmed by information, whether particularly in the world of investing. And so then they may make a rash decision impulsively, suddenly, as a result, or they may just get stuck in that analysis paralysis and never really make a decision. So one trick for that is it's an old trick. I didn't come up with it. It's called the 3-2-1 rule, right? Take 3 days to research an investment or a decision or a purchase, whatever that is. You might want to consult 2 experts in the field and then make one decision. Okay. And then lastly, of course, we have the keeping up with the Joneses and the Smiths and the Kardashians cancer that sevens can get onto when they're really anxious about money. They're always comparing themselves to other people, thinking everyone else is having more fun, or the grass is always greener, or wouldn't it be better if I was like this person or that person and having what they have. And so they're just trying to scramble to keep up, and that gets them stuck in a kind of a difficult cycle as well. And they get, again, running on that hamster wheel, which sevens get spun up often in their own heads, but often in their lives. And so, all right, so we've covered the main traits of the Gorger and the Grabber. But if you want some real tips and tricks on how to overcome those traits and become a money master, check out my new book, Taming Your Money Monster. And if you guys like it, I'd appreciate reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. So far, 5-star reviews on Amazon all the way across the board. So I'd love to keep that going. But if you like these videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll talk to you all next time. Have a great day.